Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event about family disputes. What should we do about mom? What does mom want? With Marcy Einhorn. Marcy Einhorn, attorney and mediator, provides conflict resolution services to families engaged in complex decision making. She helps the people involved get to the heart of a dispute and find the common ground that it takes to move beyond hardened positions from conflict to resolution. Marcy Einhorn has specialized training in mediation, including disputes involving older adults and their families. And now I turn it over to you, Marcy.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Okay, I'm Marcy Einhorn, and I'm an attorney and a mediator. And let me just share my screen, and then we will get started. So tonight, we're going to look at problems in family decision-making when it's time for mom or dad to make decisions that affect the entire family. As we age, we can sense changes in the air, and sometimes it seems like everything is changing. Our housing decisions need to be made, our income and expenses are changing, decisions need to be made about medical care, our overall well-being. And when our decisions affect other family members, there can be lots of different opinions about what we should be doing with our lives. And let's see. How we handle other people's opinions depends on a lot of different things. How confident are we in our choices? How much do we value other family members' opinions? And how easy is it to talk about all of these decisions with our family? So before things get heated, it may be time to try a different way of solving disagreements. And that's what we're going to talk about this evening, especially when the disagreement is about our own choices. So again, lots of decisions to be made as we age. We could be talking about caregiving, healthcare, dividing up the family money, important life cycle decisions. And wouldn't it be great if the whole family was on board and agreed with everything that we were thinking of doing? But it's so easy for things to get complicated, whether historical sibling rivalries get involved, or geographic challenges exist where people are living far apart from each other and really can't come together to discuss what needs to be discussed, or just a history of complicated relationships. So in today's program, we're going to look at the conflicts that can arise as we start making these important decisions. And we'll look at a different way of addressing disagreements with the people who matter to you most. You may have to make important decisions about a variety of important matters. For example, your finances. Perhaps your adult siblings, your adult children, have very strong opinions about what should be happening with your money as you age. And maybe one adult child wants to be sure that mom's or dad's money is very well managed, while another adult child is concerned that the parent be financially independent, and another adult child might just be concerned about the possibility that a stranger is taking advantage of mom or dad's money. Other decisions, other quality of life decisions that need to be made involve when it's time to give up driving if you're a driver. And that raises the issues of how will we get to our appointments? How will we keep from becoming isolated and staying in touch with our friends, getting out to social events? Maybe am I a danger on the road, or do I just need to brush up on my driving skills? And who will drive me around if I give up my car? And finally, tonight, we can look at whether or not when we're downsizing, some of us still own homes, and is it time to sell the house? And the adult children in the family may have very strong opinions about whether dad or mom stays or leaves the house, even though they're not even living in it anymore. And then where would I live? And having to start all over again. These would all be concerns that come up with determining a change in residence. So conflict arises when people take strong positions. I can never agree to what you're saying, and those things will never work. But resolution can look like many different things. And we'll be talking tonight about the different types of ways to get to resolution. So common barriers to a solution to conflict include things like trust, a history of trust or a lack of trust in each other's opinions, communication problems, historical impasses that where you've been stuck before and not able to agree on resolution, or just the emotional content of a particular decision. An impasse occurs when people hold tight to their version of the facts and are unwilling to hear and consider any other possible set of facts. So, tonight we'll talk about a tool called mediation, which helps the parties involved in making decisions change their focus from hardened positions, which rely on hardened conclusions, to expressing their interests and concerns that come up around the particular problem and are not always revealed when people are talking about the situation. So, for example, an oldest sibling's position might be mom needs me to manage her money, while another child might say mom has a right to do whatever she wants with her money. And yet another child will say, we need to know whose mom's friend is and what their relationship is when it comes to mom's money. But when it comes to looking beyond these hardened positions to the siblings or adult children's interests in the parent, we start to peel back the layers and learn everybody's concerned about mom's autonomy, mom or dad's independence, their ability to maintain their social connections, and their need to stay safe. So we start looking for common ground when we move off of hardened positions and committed sets of facts to finding what our interests are. And we start to see that everybody can agree. We don't want mom to be taken advantage of. We don't want mom or dad. We want mom or dad to be financially independent. And we all want decisions that mom or dad can live with. So the next steps then in moving beyond, once we've identified some common interests, is to start developing a problem-solving plan. And in order to develop a plan, some of the tools that can be used through the help of a mediator is to start gathering information about the particular problem and then coming back together and collaborating and sharing that information. So information gathering is a step on the path to collaboration. And collaboration is a building block for resolving disagreements. I like to suggest that people try to find this movie, The Farewell, and see if you can watch it through, because it's a scenario where an Asian American family learns that their grandmother living abroad has a health issue. And the family has traditional concepts of how to share information and disagrees with people who have more common values about information sharing with the grandma. It's a very interesting movie, very entertaining, right on point to see how families have to struggle with different sets of values in making decisions, in this case, about sharing healthcare information. So again, this particular family had old-fashioned traditions and customs that conflicted with modern choices when it came to deciding how much information to share with the grandmother about her cancer diagnosis. In some families, tradition may not conflict with modern choices, but yet different family members may have very strong opinions and may disagree with each other about many different aspects of medical care and planning. For example, one challenge might be who gets to decide what to tell an elder about his or her diagnosis and care plan. You could ask the medical personnel to share that information. Maybe family members want to step up, a faith leader, or maybe a friend. And then what should we tell the mom or dad about their disease? And then we describe the possible treatment options, talk about the prognosis, and what about alternative treatment options? And when should mom or dad be told? If the family already knows, how long do we want to keep this from mom or dad and share with them the truth about their diagnosis? Should it be in a family meeting? Should the information be shared by medical staff? Or maybe a sit down, a one on one? So, this is where the process of mediation can be very helpful in making decisions about these very difficult, important decisions. Just a little information about mediation: it is a confidential process, it is voluntary, it is facilitated by a neutral third party who is trained to facilitate family conversations. It can be quick and economical, especially when compared to legal disputes, official legal disputes. What mediation is not is it's not a substitute for therapy, for counseling, for social work, or for any type of support services. And in fact, whenever I'm involved as a mediator, I encourage the family members to continue to rely on the support services that they already have in place, or in fact, to add on support services if they're finding they're having deeper problems with participating in the problem solving process. So, mediation is an independent process. It does not have to involve court or litigation or attorneys. It does not have to involve the sharing of financial documents or personal information that you might otherwise be required to share in a legal proceeding. And a successful mediation does not always result in one final agreement. It might be part of an ongoing process of learning to communicate with the family members in a different way. So, mediation itself can start off with a court mandated program if you're already involved in litigation, but it can start with a family member reaching out to an independent mediator and asking for information and support around a family problem. Or family members might be referred to a mediator by a knowledgeable professional. And then what could happen at a mediation? First of all, there'll be an intake where there's screenings for abuse, neglect, and everybody's capacity to cognitively participate in a family discussion. First sessions will include things like introductions of everybody in the room, naming the problem, setting agreed guidelines for discussing the problem and how people are going to treat each other at the mediation, then stating goals and outlining expectations and defining what success will look like at the mediation itself. So, a mediator's tools and techniques, we've discussed some of this already, include identifying parties' interests and helping them move beyond their hardened positions, helping them find common ground through conversation, gathering information, which may require delegating responsibility to different family members to go gather some information on a particular aspect of the problem and come back and collaborate, share that information, and help develop a problem solving plan. So, whatever the issue might be that brings a family into conflict and seeking third party, neutral, confidential mediation, the elder is always in the room. And that refers to the fact that, unlike in a court dispute where there's a very clear definition of what an elder's capacity is to participate in a dispute. In mediation, capacity is a much more generous definition. So somebody who might not have the ability to participate in a legal proceeding or the capacity to understand the consequences of legal rulings might very well be able to participate in family conversations with a neutral facilitator helping to run the conversation. So even though an elder might be cognitively impaired or in decline, but they may be concerned enough and aware enough of the consequences of the dispute and be willing and interested in participating in the conversation. And there are no hard line rules that preclude an elder with some sort of cognitive impairment from actually participating at the table. So typical issues that could be discussed at a mediation, I've mentioned some of them already: medical care and treatment, moving and changing homes, managing personal finances, transportation issues, whether or not to keep driving or even taking public transportation. Maybe there are relationship issues with family members that need to be discussed, or hobbies and interests that are no longer doable or appropriate. And of course, time spent with friends and acquaintances and the importance of that. So, in today's program, we looked at conflicts that arise in the care and planning for an elder's well-being. And then we looked at mediation as an effective tool for addressing these conflicts. We learned that when parties to a conflict take hardened positions in reliance on certain facts, it doesn't leave much room for discussion and problem solving. But when parties move beyond their hardened positions and start to reach a building block for agreement on more complex aspects of the conflict. So, for example, when a family comes together to discuss just maybe the simple issue of whether or not the parent should continue driving, and there are all these differences of opinion about what should happen. One tool that mediators will use is to get everybody to agree on something very, very basic. Can we all agree that we all love mom? And once we have a basic agreement like that, we can begin moving off of the simplest building block of agreement towards more difficult issues. So, as we discussed as well, collaboration and information sharing can be very useful in helping the family to reach a consensus that otherwise they were unable to reach. So if the problem is something like somebody notices that the parent's car has some dents in it that are unexplained and nobody is talking about what happened, when the family comes together to discuss it, it's possible that perhaps there's an issue with the brakes. Perhaps mom's medications need to be adjusted, or her eyeglasses need to be checked. And when was the last time she went to a doctor to check on all of her meds or her vision? And so, with the help of adult siblings, adult children, the adult parent might allow the children to take the car to a mechanic and have the brakes checked, to have the doctor review meds, maybe some blood work is called for, and see that everything is in balance, and have his or her glasses checked and make sure that her vision is appropriately cared for. And then when everybody has a piece of this important information, to come back together and share that information with each other and begin to look at what might the real problem be with the car and the driving. So again, mediation is a confidential conversation. It's facilitated by a trained, neutral mediator. It's voluntary and it's expeditious and economical. And I like to encourage elders and family members who care about or are involved with caring for and loving an elder to consider mediation when the family is in conflict about decision making in important life cycle decisions. And with that, I'd love to open up the room to any questions there might be with the help of my administrator.
Yeah. Well, I'll start. And my question would be, how would uh would a family find a mediator as opposed to an attorney?
Well, that's a great question, Jeff. And one of the reasons I'm here today is to help get the word out that mediation is a resource. So many times people tell me about having had problems like this in their family and not knowing that mediators were available. Now there are lists of mediators who are available. In New York, the court system has really made an effort to expand the availability of willing and qualified mediators by listing their names in the court's websites. There are also bar associations now have mediation committees which can provide referrals to qualified mediators in different areas. And the names of the bar associations are easy to Google in New York City, New York State, and find out where mediators are serving.
Great. I have two questions that seem very similar. One is Pepita is asking who pays for the mediator, and Tanya also asked who pays for mediation services and how do we learn the cost? Must we meet in person with the mediator is the second question.
Okay, great questions. The first one, who pays? Ideally, the family together is going to pay a pro rata share. So if divide up the mediator's fee equally among the family members. But even if they decide among themselves that one family member is going to pay a substantial portion of the fee, the mediator's client is the whole family. So it doesn't matter who actually comes up with the money. The family is the client, and the fee ideally will be paid in equal parts by everybody involved at the mediation itself. And the second part of the question was
Was must we meet in person with the mediator?
a lot of mediation is done on Zoom, just like we're doing right now. So just like life has uh, Zoom has become a natural resource for so many of us in so many areas of our lives. Mediation can also be done on Zoom, which is especially helpful if family members don't live near each other. They live all over the country, and you can still run a really effective mediation on Zoom.
Oh, great. Is it okay if I unshare the screen so people
Sure,
can see us?
sure,
Okay.
sure. You want me to take that down? I can take that.
Sure.
Sure.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. And here's a question. Good question. Is mediation binding?
It's only as binding as the parties decide to make it. It's if they decide to make it enforceable in a court of law, they can put that language in the agreement. But generally, the results of a mediation depend on goodwill and everybody's intention to resolve the problem amicably according to their conversations.
Okay. And Mary asks how to gather the whole family together for these discussions.
Yeah, it's always a challenge. Once one person reaches out and asks a private mediator for help, the mediator can then take the contact information for all the family members who need to be in the conversation, and the mediator can call each and every one of them and begin to gather them and gauge their interest and their availability and set up the Zoom or the personal in-person meeting if that's what the family decides they want to do. But that is part of the mediator's job, to get everybody aware and to the table.
Wow. Here's a question. I'll ask it. I'm sure it varies. From Mary, what is the cost?
Yeah, anybody wants to reach out to me directly and we'll talk about my fee. And I don't want to represent that my fees are the average or the normal, above or below. Every mediator is going to have a different scale. So you have to reach out to particular mediators to find out what their fees are like.
Okay, and Vicky asks, have you ever seen instances where one sibling and their spouse think they deserve to be in charge? Has it ever reached the point of bullying?
It can reach the point of bullying. That's also the mediator's job to protect everyone in the room. Hopefully the family at the beginning will set some guidelines that they can agree on about how to treat each other at the mediation. It's not uncommon for somebody to come into the discussion thinking that they are the natural inheritor of power and control in the family, and then it's up to the family and the mediator by agreement on how those situations are going to be handled. In a Zoom and even in person, the mediator can separate family members into separate rooms, separate Zoom rooms, and speak to them separately and not allow the one family member to bully or take control or dominate a session.
Okay, and this is more a comment than a question from Marlon. Good answer as to binding ability of a mediated agreement.
Yeah, yeah. Even if a mediation is uh, adjacent to an existing court proceeding, um, the understanding, even in those mediations, they're confidential, they're non-binding. The only information that goes back to the actual judge who's presiding on the case is whether or not the parties settled the case. So nothing that comes up in a court annexed mediation can be shared in the proceedings in the courtroom. And if the parties don't settle but exchanged confidential information, typically there's a confidentiality agreement signed at the very beginning before they even begin the mediation. So none of that information becomes part of the litigation. Only when the parties have settled a pending lawsuit through mediation, that's the fact that gets back communicated back to the court, and the case will be resolved that way.
Pepita asks, is there a professional organization of mediators?
I'm trying to think of I'll have to think about who I would recommend as a professional organization. There are websites that mediate.com, for example, where you can just see who is serving the public, and it will list organizations and individual mediators as well. There's also the American Arbitration Association, but arbitration is a very different dispute resolution tool from mediation. So I'm not sure what resources they offer for private mediations.
Okay. And Jan asked, is your practice mostly issues that wouldn't usually be in court, like when to tell mom her diagnosis versus something that potentially would be litigated?
So I do take on cases that are already pending in court. They might be guardianship cases where the family members are arguing over subtleties of who has control over the assets or the care of the parent. And I also will take court cases from surrogates court where somebody's passed away and the family is arguing over the the decedent's intentions about who was to get which assets or yeah. So those kind of cases are court related, but I will serve individuals whose families are in dispute. They're not looking to begin a lawsuit. You can't start a lawsuit over whether or not we should take away someone's car keys. That's not a litigation centered dispute. And I think there's a lot of disputes below the litigation radar that I want to serve. And it could be healthcare decisions, it could just be about who shares information, or maybe there's a family home that the family shares in even as adults, and it might be a dispute over who gets to use the home and what season, what adult children and grandchildren have access to the home. Or it might be about who gets to visit the adult who might be in the care of a caregiver, and what that schedule could look like. So all of these things can arise without any court proceeding pending, and still cause problems in the family that lawyers are never going to be able to resolve. But mediators can help facilitate the family's conversation so the family can reach a conclusion that they can live with.
Oh, very good. Now, Veronica asks, are mediation sessions recorded and kept on records? Are transcripts or minutes made of each session?
Great question. So, never. So again, even if their mediation sessions are launched in connection with a pending litigation, everybody signs a confidentiality agreement saying they will not record, and they will not use any of the information that's revealed in a mediation. And that is enforceable. The confidentiality agreement is enforceable in a court of law. The resolution of the problem itself may not be an enforceable agreement, but the uh, confidentiality agreement is enforceable. And so, no, and I think people agree right up front, especially in my agreements, nothing is going to be recorded, nothing's going to be used. And if you're on a Zoom screen, there's nobody else in the room off screen, off camera, that we don't know about. So confidentiality is a very valuable, important characteristic of mediation. And mediation depends on confidentiality to make it work.
And Tanya asks, do you recommend how to solve problems as the mediator?
Great question. Thank you, Tanya. So, the mediator's role is rarely, if ever, to recommend solutions. The mediator's role is to get the family started talking to each other in a constructive manner, which they may not have been able to do in the past. The families may ask the mediator to make recommendations, but mediators are reluctant to offer their suggestions or solutions because the goal is to begin to build a construct for the family members to move forward and deal with each other one on one in a new way and have new ways of communicating with each other. And the mediator is not going to always be there. And the solution to one particular problem is just going to disguise the possibility of the family learning to work together in the long term.
Do you lay ground rules in the beginning for the family's communication, or do you have things like a talking stick?
Some mediators do use a talking stick. I don't, and especially in Zoom, I think that would be a little difficult to facilitate.
Yeah.
I do like the families to come up with their own rules. I'm always hoping that they're going to agree not to interrupt each other. I have in some mediations explained to people you're going to hear things that you might not like hearing. Instead of trying to respond immediately to things that you've heard, you can take notes. Everybody's going to have a turn to speak without being interrupted, and we will ask to hear from you about information you've heard that you might not be very happy about. So hopefully the family will come up with those guidelines as a family. And if they don't have any idea of how to suggestions to make. I will suggest guidelines for communicating with each other at a mediation that I'm going to be facilitating.
Oh, great. Mary asks, isn't it hard to break through hardened positions?
That's the challenge. The challenge is to break through hardened positions. I think with knowledge of the difference between positions and interests, positions being very fact based, and in people are very invested in outcomes, and moving into stating interests and finding common interests, loving the adult, caring for the parent, concern, those types of conversations just change the direction. People may still be very invested in their positions, but the positions are not going to be discussed as the meat of the mediation. What's going to be discussed is the common interests and how we can get to a solution that respects those common interests.
So it becomes more collaborative and finding the common ground before you tackle the tough questions.
Yeah, well, again, going for a simple, um, just something very simple everyone can agree on. Why are we all here? We're all here because we're all concerned about mom or dad. In a recent mediation that I conducted, mom was in the hospital. The father was the stepfather to several adult children. Not all of them showed up at the mediation, but four of them did. And none of them were his children. And he was the caregiver for mom. And there had been a previous history of arguments and disputes in front of the judge. The reason it was sent to mediation was because the family members were all arguing in front of the judge, and the judge felt that they needed somebody to facilitate their conversations. And at the very beginning, they were all over the country. Again, this was not their natural father. This was a stepfather who was 100% caregiver for their mother, who they were very concerned about. And they all were able to agree at the beginning, we're all concerned about mom, and we all want mom to be able to come home. And that was a start. And that was the beginning of having a conversation about mom's care and planning that moved away from who took mom's money, concerned about her jewelry, who made those medical decisions. We just never got caught up in any of that because it became a very productive session after everybody was able to articulate that we were all there for the same reason, for concern about mom's well-being.
The last slide that you had was uh, the most important person in the room
The elder
is the
The
yep.
elder is always in the room. So even if the elder is hospitalized, institutionalized, has no idea that a Zoom cognitively could never comprehend that there's a conversation going on about their care and planning, the reality is, I like to say the elder is in the room because the mediation is all about the elder. And that's why, whether physically or emotionally, it's the elder who's in the room. It's not about the adult children's priorities for themselves.
Veronica, Veronica asks, can I withdraw from mediation at any point?
That's usually stated right up front in the mediation agreement that the parties are asked to sign, that you can withdraw at any time. Nobody has to stay beyond their comfort zone, their comfort level. But the mediator does have the ability to separate the parties, even in a Zoom, and have separate conversations with them, and then carry information back and forth with the parties' permission. So, and that brings up that confidentiality issue again, that if I'm working with a family and they're in separate Zooms, they're not able to be on the same screen together, and they start sharing confidential information with me separately, I cannot share anything that's shared with me in a confidential setting with anybody else in the family unless I'm given express permission. So it's like a double layer of confidentiality. not only is everything in the Zoom in the mediation confidential, but everything that I am told confidentially by individual family members cannot be repeated by me to other family members unless they give me express permission.
So if someone withdraws from the mediation, but the rest of the family wants to stay in, the decisions that are reached would be conveyed to the person who withdrew.
That would be a conversation to have with the person who's withdrawing. It depends on
Mhm.
why they're withdrawing and what their request is. Maybe they're not interested. Maybe they don't want any more information and they just want to be cut out of the whole decision-making process. It's a case-by-case decision depending on the person who's withdrawing and the family members who remain.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions. Does anyone have? We're running early, actually. We thought we would run over. Is it usual for the elder to be physically present?
In guardianship proceedings, generally not. But if it's a family mediation that has nothing to do with a pending court proceeding, ideally the elder would be there. Another tool that mediators use is a comfort object or person attending with the elder. So if the elder has an aide and the family agrees for the aide to be present with the elder because that would make the elder comfortable, the aide can be present, not necessarily involved in discussions, or maybe a trusted religious faith leader or trusted friend, somebody who's not going to be involved in actually making the decision, but might make an elder who ordinarily might be uncomfortable hearing disagreement and argument and debate might be more comfortable with a trusted somebody trusted to accompany them who's really not involved in participating in the discussions. Ideally, the elder will participate and will be there, and it all depends on their physical, emotional, cognitive ability to participate.
Oh, here's a good question from Veronica. What is the average number of sessions?
So there's no average. Of course, I like families to start off at least committing to an hour. Court mandated programs usually run 90 minutes at a minimum. Not everybody takes the full 90 minutes. And in other types of mediation, say commercial disputes between businesses, some mediators are known to run their sessions for entire workday, for 6 hours, 8 hours, maybe brief breaks for lunch or refreshments or, excuse me, for bathrooms. I don't think family mediations are effective like that, if they're run like that. I think a lot of emotional content comes up for different people at different times. And I like to suggest that people at least commit to the first hour, and then they can decide whether they want to continue and the terms they want to continue on. If there's a progress being made at the first hour, but there's still a lot of work to be done, I suggest considering 3 hours, what I call a half day, as a maximum session. And it can be done in 3 hour commitments, so a 3 hour session, take a break, and set up a date to come back to continue the conversation. These are all great questions. Thank you for your interest. I can't tell you how many people, when I start telling them about mediation, say to me, I had a situation like that. I wish I'd known you 5 years ago. I wish I'd known you 10 years ago. I've spoken to professionals in their professional capacity, and we like to do a role play when I do this live. The room breaks up into everybody takes on the role of the elder, the adult child, the mediator, And when we come back together there, everybody explains, oh, I had a situation just like that in my life. And it might be the hypothetical might be something about should we sell the family home? Or the examples I gave in tonight's PowerPoint. Should we take away mom's car keys? Who's mom seeing and where's all her money going? And when we do role plays, which are a lot of fun, we had hoped maybe we would get one in tonight, but the format wasn't amenable to that. But the role plays really bring out all the idiosyncrasies that can come up in a particular family and how they can help or harm an ultimate resolution.
Okay, and here's another statement, I guess. Trust from Marlin. Trust takes time to build, and trust is often the bedrock of mediation.
Well, thank you. And trust in the mediator is often the bedrock of the mediation, not just trust in each family member in each other, but you have to trust that the mediator is going to keep you safe in this highly charged environment. So trust is a very big factor.
So the court is one place where the topic of mediation comes up. Uh, how would people come up with the idea of mediation on their own?
Yeah, I think that mediators are making a greater effort like this to do public information sessions to help spread the word that mediation is out there. Again, somebody might wind up bar association looking for an attorney and learn from the bar association that they also have attorneys who are mediators. So it's an information sharing issue. It's a challenge for mediators to get the word out, and it's a challenge for the public to learn that mediation is a resource.
In our litigious society, I think it sounds like mediation is a great alternative, not only in terms of collaborating, but also just financially.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, litigation can take years, and attorneys' time when they get involved in litigation can be very expensive. Mediation, you're sitting down without a court process, you're sitting down face to face with the people being affected by the decision, and you're fashioning the decision yourselves with the help of a neutral mediator. And you're only going to have to pay the mediator. There are no filing fees. There are there's no litigation staff that has to be carried along financially by the attorney. It's just the mediator in the room and the mediator's direct expenses. So it can be quite economical. There are no papers that have to be filed. There are no experts that have to be paid. Unless the parties think that it would facilitate their conversation if they had outside information from other experts. But generally, in these family disputes, it's just the mediator's expenses paid for by the family.
Wow. Any further questions from anyone? The chat and the Q&A are quiet right now.
Okay,
If
so I do want to just, remind everyone it's a confidential process. It's economical, as we've just described. It's the mediator is trained and neutral and doesn't have any particular outcome that he or she is looking to promote. The best interests of the elder is the deciding issue, and the goal is to bring everybody together to make a decision that will serve the elder in the best interests.
yes, and here's a question I think we might need clarification. It's simply, do families often break up? Do you
Uh,
have a little?
it's kind of a general question, so um, maybe if you could be a little more specific about that, what you're
Yeah,
asking.
if you could type a little more in the chat. In the meantime, let me put into the chat the information about coming of age. We're going to have a poll sent to you about tonight's event, and we hope that you'll be able to complete it. But I also put it in the chat. Some people don't receive our emails. And here is okay. I think the explanation to the question is, does this system remedy bad blood?
So the goal is to introduce a different way of dealing with each other. Historical disputes, again, it's not a replacement for therapy, for counseling, for social work. It's just a tool for learning how to speak to each other in a productive way on a particular issue. And if the skills that are learned in a mediation can be transferred to other disputes going forward in the family, it could help resolve the historical disputes, the historical problems in a particular family. But again, it's not therapy. It's not intended to heal, historical impasses in the past. It's just about the problem being presented in the moment and addressing it through new skills and new ways of communicating that the family members may never have been introduced to before.
So it could result in decisions being made, but not necessarily.
Again, a successful mediation might not reach a conclusion, a final decision. It might just help people begin to address how to communicate with each other productively in this situation and going forward. So, for example, something like information gathering and then coming back and sharing the information might be something very new in this family, where in the past, one adult child took the position they were in charge and their decisions were the most important. This would be a whole new way of dealing with that adult child, that sibling, and if they're on board with the productive nature of mediation, they might be willing to continue to communicate with each other using those tools.
Yeah. And from Vicky, again, not a question, but a comment. Relationships are complicated. Yes, I think they are, but it sounds like mediation is not there to fix relationships.
Right. It might be a wonderful beneficial side effect. The mediation is there to solve the problem that brought the family into the room, not to solve all the problems in that family or in the individuals who make up that family.
Well, thanks so much, Marcy. This was really informative,
Great.
and it's a whole layer of communication that families that think the court is the only way
Right.
um, can avail themselves to.
Yeah. So thanks, Jeff, for giving me a forum for helping to get the word out that it is a wonderful resource for people. And as we age, as we boomers continue to age, more and more of us will be making these life cycle decisions that affect our family members. And to have a productive way to communicate with them would be really beneficial.
Okay, everyone. So you can uh, visit her website at Marcy Einhorn, MarcyEinhorn.com, or to email, it's marcyesque, ESQUE, @gmail.com.